Welcome everyone to the 2019 MFA reading series here at Rosemont College. Our first reader tonight is Dan Crawford. Dan graduated from the University of Scranton in 2015 and is currently pursuing his MFA in creative nonfiction at Rosemont College. He works in the financial services industry and resides in the Fairmount section of Philadelphia. Please welcome Dan.
In a late summer afternoon in my early 20s, the storm that whipped across a New Jersey park immersed the woods in brief, unrelenting chaos. A sudden fracture of the evening quiet that flooded with rain and drummed the roof of my father's car like restless feet. When it slowed, the trees outside straightened and unpeeled the hiking trail from the forest floor, exuding new smells of dampness and water, the heavy, earthen musk of calm after a summer rainstorm. Pocks of water lay curdled along the trail, cradling twigs that floated like shrapnel amidst the hollowed, dense void between underbrush and treetops. At first, my parents and I hiked together in a uniform, committed exertion, t-shirts clinging to our backs, skin flecked with dirt and salt. I quickly found myself ahead of them, anxious to move at a higher pace, eager to experience the quiet in the forest that seemed to envelop me like a cowl. From small rise in the trail, I paused to look back and saw my father resting, content for a moment to discontinue the journey. Slightly ahead of him, my mother peered into the trees with her hands on her hips, as if looking to articulate a question of which she could not find the substance, answered only by the flash of a wren through the dripping tree boughs. My sister was the one who helped me pack the car before I left for New Hampshire. We filled the Toyota with unrealistic expectations of its capacity for storage. Every corner was utilized, every inch of space beneath the seats robbed of its emptiness for the sake of an extension cord, an extra roll of toilet paper, a bedside lamp. We worked in the morning humidity and sweated through our shirts as we stooped in the back and rearranged laundry, a desk chair, books that I knew I wouldn't read but couldn't imagine leaving behind, an exercise in the embrace of things that survive in the limbo of the unnecessary, an effort to fill a cup that is already overflowing. The place had everything I needed when I moved in. Room for my bed, thin bookcase, a galley kitchen, and a battered love seat that presided over a coffee table. South of my 24 by 15 foot studio sprawled miles of highway and mountains that teased the northeastern coastline. At night, alone in that small apartment, I thought about the steady unfurling of the world as it had passed me in the driver's side window, snapshots of miles I left behind, the briefest frames of time and place that would forever remain in the rear view. I wondered about the pulse of the woods around the apartment building, the purple veil of night that lingered over the grounds like a glaze of dust on a forgotten photograph. Often, I would strain to hear the sounds of other restless, solitary drifters of the twilight, the convulsive rustling of an owl taking flight, or the wind-shorn tumbling of leaves discarded from their branches, threadbare survivors of a sweltering August for which the autumn had no place. In my parents' bedroom, there was a bureau where they kept old pictures in the bottom drawer. Once I came across a print of myself from 1996. I'm wearing a blue shirt with an octopus on it, my dirty blonde hair sitting unkempt and disruptive atop my abnormally large, cumbersome head. That day, we were on a train somewhere in central Pennsylvania, on some forgotten historical trip. Perhaps we'd gone to see the wide swaths of green fields that stretch over the heart of the state like skin, watch the farms and woods flit through the window panes like frightened sparrows on a summer morning. Maybe I'm watching each piece of the countryside tick by like dominoes of fields and trees falling westward along with the path of the train, one long line towards Allegheny County. My mother once told me that after the picture was taken, I wandered off to explore the other reaches of the train. I imagined meandering alone past other families sitting in booths, skirting the pant legs of waiters and crew. Perhaps I wobbled past other children sitting respectfully between their parents and swayed with the rumble of the train, unaccustomed to the absence of solid ground. Maybe I wandered to the very end of the car and could go no further, only to turn back and feel the arms of my searching, distressed mother around me once again. Barnacle geese, taxonomically defined as Bronta leucopsis, reside in the icy regions of the northern Atlantic. In Greenland, females lay their eggs in rugged pockets of sea cliffs to protect them from predators. As soon as the eggs hatch, the adult geese leave their young on the cliffs and drop to the crisp, salted grass along the shoreline below. As a result, the chicks first experience life utterly alone in a wind-blasted gray world hundreds of feet above solid ground. I have wondered if they are aware of the severity of their independence, if there is a precedent buried somewhere in their genealogy, some paroxysm of instinct, a resignation to abandonment produced by the millions of hatchlings that survived before them. Unable to fly, they are forced to throw themselves from the cliffs in hopes of reaching their parents below. According to the BBC, mature barnacle geese do not feed their young and exclusively eat glass, stipulating that, quote, the only way for the goslings to survive is to make the daredevil descent, end quote. Of course, some of the chicks are killed or injured during the jump. Some will smash against outcroppings or will be thrown back into the rock face, their threadbare wings spasming in the wind, shedding membrane and amniotic fluid as they plummet towards the shoreline. Easy prey for the Arctic foxes that pad amidst the crags. Their parents, their eyes turned upward, wait to lead the hatchlings to the patches of seagrass edging outward from the rocks, waiting to show them the path towards survival together for the very first time. In the apartment, I listened for the sounds outside the window and heard none but the distant hum of an electric generator creeping through the lukewarm autumn midnight. In the corner of the room by the television, the light of my desk lamp seemed to shriek in the sepulchral quiet and illuminate the photographs on my bulletin board. Prints of a family trip to Rhode Island, another of my best friends in a New York City bar. All of them glossy renditions of moments whose details we did not want to lose to memory. From my seat, I could make out my mother's curls on the beach in Rhode Island. I remember the wind on that day, the tidal pools that stirred between the coastal rocks along the bedraggled shoreline. I thought of home and the path I had taken to get to where I was. I felt a void, a longing anticipated by the decision to move away. I fell asleep with a beer in my lap as I watched the lights from the television ebb and roll along the ceiling, cool blues and whites that brushed the walls like a pre-dawn mist that whispers the morning to life. I first saw a video of the harrowing gosling jumps on YouTube. I watched it on a company computer from a cubicle on the third floor of my office building. My job was to talk to the grief-stricken and sometimes resentful, to people calling to report the death of a son, a husband, a mother. People clambering in the wake of loss to claim financial assets. Children scrabbling to determine if they are beneficiaries of estates and trusts of their parents. Coming back to the original nest, coming back to roost. From the window, I looked out at the trees around the building. I imagined the height of the Greenland cliffs where the barnacle geese must survive to reunite with their parents. In the evenings, I looked for the hawks in the pine trees that skirted the office parking lot. In the spring, I imagined their young sitting quiet and severe, hidden in the branches, and often I did not see them. The incubation period for the barnacle goose chick lasts approximately 5 days. The mother will shoulder nearly all duties in this regard, with the father occasionally stepping in to mind the rocky nest while she feeds. I wonder what passes between them in those periods of waiting, if hopes are harbored against the wind as they anticipate the arrival of their chicks. Does the mother worry about the rocks below? Does she peer through the teeth of a northern Atlantic sunrise and recall her own leap into the uncertain? Who can know? She has lost hatchlings before, and she will lose them again. Perhaps she will only concern herself with those who rise from their shells and return to her after the jump through space and salt and bitter cold, survivors from the very outset of their lives. The intensive care unit of Abington Memorial Hospital is swathed in a pallor of muted beige that seems to embody the ambivalence of waiting to hear news. At 25, seated on a plastic chair with a squelching rubber cushion and skid marks beneath the legs, I waited in room 3034 for answers concerning the survival of my father. The anxiety of unknowing and the cynical, silent musings of doubt dulled the machine ripples and beeps at his bedside, the shuffle of the nurse's feet as she checked the monitors. I remember thinking of New Hampshire, of persisting alone in the heavy quiet of the New England night. I reimagined our phone calls that reached across the miles between the love seat of my apartment and his rocking chair outside our kitchen. In my mind, I saw the quivering heart beneath the steady rise and fall of his chest, saw it spasm and rattle in that bloody cavity, pulse and shake and strain for life. The doctor explained that ventricular tachycardia occurs when the heart beats too quickly and cannot right itself, leading to chemical abnormalities and cardiac arrest. In the hours before the triple bypass surgery that was intended to ensure his survival, the nurses contended that the operation was normal. They spoke the expectation that we could understand the notion of removing my father's heart from his chest to divert the flow of blood to clearer vessels, the arterial roads that would sustain the journey of his life. I remember seeing the fear writ around the creases of my mother's eyes. I remember the tightness with which she held herself, arms wrapped around her body against the cold winter sunshine drifting through the window. I thought I could see her mind turning over on itself to times of loss that enveloped her before, flashes that darted at the edges of her memory and bashed into the ignorance to which we were all beholden on that morning. Now it is this lack of knowledge that I return to, that void in the hours surrounding the operation as we waited for news, for hope. A time of resignation to the potential and indifference of loss, a return to a consideration of finality, a memory of fear and exposure in the sterile white box of room 334. Easter was bleak this year, devoid of the resplendent sunshine and cautious warmth of early spring. The last great snowstorm of the season had passed, and the world outside my childhood home was gently giving itself away to newness as April arrived on the shirt tails of winter. On Easter morning, several weeks after my father's surgery, Mom made a red casserole while I made coffee. My siblings were seated around the lazy Susan at the center of the kitchen table. All of us quietly acknowledged the weighted hum of the circumstances. When we sat for breakfast and I watched my family pray, my father could not contain the tears that slipped from his chin and settled quietly under shirt front like windswept snow nestled on a mountain face. Today, Dad has a scar that cuts through his chest hair and a 7-inch ridge of flesh, a cauterized pathway to the beginning and end of him, to what was, at one point, also the beginning of me. Now when we sit together in the living room and watch football or talk about the future, I often think of the heart behind that pink ridgeline. I think of the years that have slipped behind us, the distance between the inertia of dependency and the necessity of autonomy. I reach for answers to existential questions in an uncertain life and imagine what my world will be when I no longer have a father to return to. To persist is to survive is to persist after the end of something else, to endure in the wake of the cessation of another thing. My life is a perpetual discontinuance of the child I was before, but always I am ready to return home.